started this channel, good grief, seven, maybe 8 years ago, and have since had 10,000 some people subscribe to this, hundreds of thousands of views, beyond anything we ever thought possible when we started this. So first I want to take a second and thank you guys for that. That is, it's you that has that happen. So, but the channel's been pretty silent for the last couple of years. In fact, I was contemplating at the end of last season just kind of letting it die gracefully. You know, frankly, I topped out in maybe like I don't think I ever broke the top 10. I might have broken the top 20 at a major once. Certainly, you know, top 30. But never really got, you know, exactly as far as I wanted to go. And then started putting matches on, and the marketing firm got big. My kids got old, and just kind of sort of let this whole thing sort of chill out a little bit. So then coming into the end of last year, I was kind of, I don't know, I was bored with the whole thing, frankly. And then, so I was looking for something to reinvigorate my shooting. If nothing else, I was just going to be satisfied with shooting local and having a great time because I still love the sport. And then on a whim, kind of decided to restart the podcast that's now called Conversations I Wanted to Have Anyway. And in one of those interviews, I talked to a guy named Charlie Perez. I've actually got his book right here, Path of Focused Effort. But in that interview with Charlie, he said some things, and I realized that I never really learned how to practice. I never really learned how to shoot well. I got very good at administering guns on the clock, specifically in the early days of quad loading. And all of my big finishes came from how good I was at putting stages together, not from shooting. So after a little bit of soul searching, I guess, I kind of was like, you know, I think I want to give this another go. So another thing to kind of note was my eyes have really been going bad the last couple of years. If you've seen videos of me working with Atlas or Arnzen Arms or even other Hawkeye stuff, you'll see me wearing reading glasses. I've pretty well lost the vision in my arm's reach. And so that was another thing that was driving me nuts. And in that conversation with Charlie, I also kind of discovered some things I could do about that. Not the least of which was considering red dots on my pistols, so going open. So that kind of got me thinking, got me curious about a few things, and then did another interview a little while later with Trevor Cotter from the Atlas Gunworks shooting team. And basically Trevor talked about ways of practicing based on Charlie's philosophy that I had never really heard before. So I decided to essentially go back to zero, like no assumptions that I know anything, and start over from scratch this year with a bias on red dots towards open. So it is now March, the beginning of March, so the 3-gun season has started. We had the first kind of winter match. It's sort of the Rust kickoff match, or whatever you want to call it. And prior to this, in January, about the second or so week of January, I took my TAC Ops pistol and put a red dot on it. So that's a SIG XFive. I got an Athena from Atlas Gunworks. I ordered a Dissident Arms, not their Vepr, but their Kalash shotgun. And a couple of other things have happened, a few pieces of gear. We'll get into more of that later, but really got very curious about practicing. So this season, the goals are not so much to become like the top open guy in 3-gun. I do want to, by the end of this season, I'd like to have some mastery of the box-fed shotgun, the red dot on pistol, and sort of the slightly different game that open is. But the major goal this year is to become an A-class pistol shooter and carry optics. So that seems pretty reasonable. It's possible. It's a tough goal, but it's possible. I don't really necessarily want to do that with classifiers. I'd like to do it for match bumps, although I'm not sure that's possible given the number of major matches I have access to in Minnesota. So that's what we've been up to. So I'm going to be playing you a bunch of video. The plan here is to, I'm recording most of this practice, and the plan here is to show you everything I did and the results, right? And sometimes they're going to be great, and sometimes they're going to suck, and that's just kind of the journey, right? So I have recorded just about everything up until now, and we're going to get into that, and also some of the gear selections. But let's talk a little bit about like how I'm practicing. So I don't want to leave you with a bunch of drills. What I want to leave you with is how to practice. So the number one thing, first thing, and I never did this in 8 years, ask somebody who knows more than you for help. It's really that simple. There are so many great people in the sport. Most of you know this by now. And they know a whole lot more than any of us do, certainly collectively. So starting with Charlie. So Charlie Perez is a Grandmaster USPSA shooter. He's on the Atlas Gunworks team. This book is intense, but it does not only talk about how to practice, but it talks about how to quantify your matches, your match performance, and then take those skills back to the Dryfire and train them out. Excuse me. So highly recommend this book. That's The Path of Focused Effort from Charlie Perez. You can find this at bigpandaperformance.com. The other book, the other resource that I'm using is Ben Stoeger's book, Dryfire Reloaded, at, what is his? It's Ben Stoeger Pro Shop, Stoeger. And I think it was $30 for this book with a set of Dryfire targets. They're these little like 1/6 and 1/3 size targets. They're awesome and make life really great, especially if you have a small space to practice. We may get into some of the old school stuff. You've seen this in some earlier videos I did. This is pretty much the original Bible for Dryfire, Steve Anderson's Refinement and Repetition. And then the other gentleman we're going to be engaging quite a bit is Joe Farwell, Farwell Firearms. He's got a video series that's coming out just after this first video will launch. So keep an eye out for that. I'll let you know when it drops. He's got a 30-day Dryfire challenge, which goes through all the 3-gun manipulations, right? So a lot of the practice is going to be carry optics, and then there'll be some open practice, and then there'll be some of just the gun manipulations back and forth, transitioning from rifle to shotgun, shotgun, pistol, whatever the deal is. And I'm going to use all those resources in order to kind of create a training program for myself. What I love about Farwell's deal and Stoeger's deal is they both actually have training like layouts for you. This is one of the most amazing books for dry. I mean, this is just literally page after page of Dryfire challenges, right? But what I didn't get in here was a really good layout of how to practice. Ben's book, actually for Dryfire, has a matrix in the back. Here's the one that I'm using. This is the hardcore training plan. And it pretty much gives you a week by week layout of exactly what to do. And you just work your way through the drills in here. And then Farwell's video is awesome video series is awesome because it's just every day there's a video to do. And whether you do it daily for 30 days or you break it up over, whatever, some period of time, like I'm going to, that's good to go. So, that's the what we're up to, right? And from here, it's a matter of looking at these skills. So the first thing that happened was carry optics. I didn't have the Athena here yet from Atlas Gunworks. Oh, one caveat. I work for Atlas Gunworks. I work for Arnzen Arms. I got a lot of industry friends. I don't buy any gear from people I don't like or work for. So if I'm, I guess the caveat here is I'm a shill for all these companies. Okay, I'm not a sponsored shooter, but I wouldn't buy anything from somebody I didn't like or trust their gear. So if if this looks like an ad sometimes, well, deal with it. Okay, so so the first thing that happened was I had this this carry optics pistol, the SIG XFive, and I threw a red dot on it to just get started. I put a Romeo 1 on there. It wasn't the most appropriate, maybe, optic, but it's kind of like the end of the world right now for buying guns. I mean, it's so crazy that I didn't have a lot of options, and that was an easy fit on the pistol. So I did that right away and started working with Trevor Cotter. I've got some great excerpts from that first conversation I had with him. I'm going to roll in now.
I'll tell you, I haven't shot a striker fire trigger with the exception of standing on a line like this in a tactical games, no movement, no nothing, in a long time. And I would say 90% of the shots that I missed or shot poorly at that match were just shit trigger control. When I went to the range last night and played around, I realized it wasn't the sight so much as it was just me throwing shots all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, trigger control is important, dude. More important. That's the most important part of shooting.
What I would like to do in this little experiment you and I are doing right now is start at the very beginning.
Perfect.
Like, I would assume that I don't know anything about shooting guns. Because the way that I performed the other day, I realized I've just been, like I told you, this just winning. My success has come from my long gun use. It has nothing to do with my pistol shooting at all. So I just want to start from the beginning.
Roger that. Well, we will do that. let's start trigger control. So the way you're going to work trigger control is anytime you take a shot, or anytime I take a shot, with the exception of super close targets that are 5 yards and in, right? Those I'll just trigger at them, right? Just trying to get them, bob, get out. But 7 yards, 10 yards, 15 yards, 20 yards, 100 yards, doesn't matter, right? When you shoot your rifle, you don't just slap the trigger, right? You prep and then fire. So anytime you take a shot, you need to prep the trigger, acquire your sights, press. So it's prep, sights, press, prep. So you'll prep the trigger, verify your sights, press, back out to back to prep. Because we fire 2 shots in almost everything, right?
Yep. Okay.
So it's always prep, sights, press, prep. But you always want to prep, press your trigger. So prep, press. And once you get good enough, that prep, press will seem like you're not actually prepping the trigger. It'll seem like you're just pressing, but you're actually prepping to the wall, seeing the sight, bam, pulling the shot.
Okay. Yep. Good.
And that's going to be, honestly, I sit down and I play with it. Like I'll sit there and play with a gun until I learn that trigger. Like I'll sit there for probably 10, 15 minutes sometimes while I'm watching a YouTube video or something and just play with the trigger, learn the trigger. Because the faster you learn the trigger, the better you're going to be at calling those shots.
Okay, good.
And then another thing when you're shooting a red dot, it's not like irons where you have to settle everything, right? Because a lot of people get caught shooting slow because they think you have to settle the dot and make sure it's when you break the shot. Think of the red dot as a paintbrush.
Okay.
That paintbrush is in your zone where you're trying to shoot, right? You're going to hit the zone if your trigger prep's correct. So whenever you're shooting now, when you're at distance, like, 15, 20, 30 yards, you're probably going to want to settle that dot a little bit more, but that's where you come into what I call flash floating focus. 7 yards and in, that's a flash. I'm just seeing a flash of dot in the A zone. Float, 10 yards to 15 yards, where I'm just kind of floating that dot in the A zone. I don't want it going super erratic, but I want it just somewhere in that A zone. And then focus is a hard cover target, a no-shoot target, or a 20 yards and out, where I want to know that dot is in a certain spot, right? So whenever I'm dry firing, say I'm going to do 2 shots on one target, right? Because we always take 2 shots at a target. Then I'm going to draw, see my sights. I'm going to prep, come back out, prep, press. So that teaches you to prep the trigger. So instead of drawing, firing, and then mocking that second shot, mock the first one, prep the wall in the first one, come back out, prep and fire. That's going to teach you really good trigger control right away.
Oh, shit, that's awesome. That's totally new for me. That's amazing.
That right there, if you do that drill, that is going to get your trigger control so far advanced so fast. Like 10 minutes of that a day for like 2 weeks, you're going to see your control just jump through the roof. Another that you want to train is transitions. So the way the fastest, when you look at shooting, most people think to shoot fast, you got to pull the trigger fast. That is the opposite of what you need to do. Like if you look at, with the exception of when you see Christians shoot some super close targets or something, right?
Yeah.
Most shots aren't bah, 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 bah. They're bop, 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 bop. He'll shoot. He's obviously got the ability to throw a fucking 9 split. I don't. Neither does JJ or none of those other guys, right? But transitions are where you save a lot of time, because if I'm shooting an 18 split and you're shooting a 10 split, you're saving per target, or 0.08, right? So not even saving it. You're saving 1/10 of a second, right? But from target to target, the transition from each target, the average transition speed for a D-class shooter is almost 3/4 of a second to a second. Whereas a GM is going to transition from one target to the next in the same time his split is. So if I'm shooting an 18 split, my transition is going to be an 18 split. That's why when you hear a high-level shooter shoot on multiple targets, it sounds like they're shooting on one target. Bop, 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 because they're transitioning fast. Now I've saved 0.7 of a second on one hit, whereas you were only saving 1/10 of a second, right? So transitions are the big breaker, right?
Yep.
What I do is I'll set up 2 targets just like this, and I'll draw to the first one, right? I'll do my prep. I'll come back out. I'll prep, and as I'm pressing, I'll transition. You want to be transitioning. It should be like you should be leaving the target as you're pulling the trigger. I can sit here and I can for 15 minutes get 250 reps in quick. I usually just sit here and I'll practice draw, prep, transition. Now I've worked on a draw, my trigger prep, and a transition in 1 rep.
Yeah, good.
And if I do 150 of those, it's going to take me 5-10 minutes. And I just did more work than that asshole who's dry firing for an hour doing all these crazy fucking drills.
Yeah, I get it. Well, and it's very clear to me right now that who gives a fuck about my reload or really even my draw, to be totally honest with you, because if I don't get the shooting down, it doesn't really matter how fast the gun comes out of the holster.
Exactly. And the draw thing, you remember I kept telling you race your support hand?
Yeah.
So this is what I was talking about, right? When you draw, you're drawing and then you're bringing your support hand up. It should be one motion. When this hand moves, this hand moves. So the faster this hand moves, the faster this one's going to move. So I pick a spot on my chest that's natural to where so what I do is I start out, I come in, and when I'm dropping the gun, that's where my hand's going to stay. So now come in. So point the gun straight out. Now come into this position where you would accept the gun.
Yep.
Now drop the gun and leave that hand. So somewhere in that zone, that may be a little high, but somewhere in that zone is where you're going to accept that gun. So now my draw, whenever this hand's coming up, this one needs to get there. So
what I noticed though was, okay, then I'm up on the gun. So I was just doing like at 7 yards, one sight picture, click, click, right? And it was first shot here, right? Second shot high.
Yep.
And then I gripped it a little more, and they started to come together.
Yep.
So what I'm getting is I'm probably not putting enough left hand into my grip to begin with.
So that is grip pressure is everything.
So now I'm left with, okay, fuck. Clearly I am not gripping my gun like I'm supposed to be. When I say, Trevor, I'm going all the way back to 0, I mean like everything. I don't want to skip over. So here's what you got to know about me. I bought a gun in fucking February. I was shooting matches by May. I was competing in 3-gun by July. The first year I ever owned a gun.
Holy shit.
and then I was like in the top 20s at majors that next season because I learned how to load the shotgun when no one else was spending the time at it, right?
Yeah.
And I skipped all of the fundamentals of shooting.
So that is a lot of information on Dryfire from Trevor, and this guy is worth listening to. He's a monster shooter. So the pistol is the one place I'm really going to go to work on this year. There's obviously tons of skills that need to be dealt with the rifle, and with certainly with the box fed shotgun and the tube fed gun as well, my M2. But the pistol seems to be my weakest place. So when I started, Trevor was pushing me right away to do a bunch of things that were a little further down the road than I thought that I actually was. So I sat down and really deliberately just kept working the trigger press, the trigger press, the trigger press, the draw, the trigger press, the reload, the draw, the trigger press, the reload, trigger press, trigger press, trigger press, until I got that thing as stable as I could. And I was, what I was doing was I was dry firing every day, and then on Thursday, every other Thursday, I was going to an indoor USPSA match, and the alternate Thursdays, I was just going to the range and just confirming 100 rounds that they were going where I said they were going to go based on my trigger press without disturbing the sights. So that's really freaking boring, and I spent 2 or 3 weeks at that. I mean, I've got tons of footage of this. I mean, there were some other skills I threw in there, but my main focus was just getting that trigger press over and over and over and over and over again until I could just blind pull the gun up, see my sights, and pull the trigger. It helped me get used to the red dot, but really, I never spent the time to really master this skill, and I haven't mastered it yet, no question. But I'm starting to get to a point where I'm consistently doing that. And you watch my scores over the 4 or 5 different matches or whatever I shot USPSA this winter from January and February. I go from like a 24% or something terrible like that to like a 30 to a 40 to a 50 or 60. And all of a sudden I'm starting to kind of move up, and I'm seeing this progression. And this is not the best field of shooters I'm going to run into this year, but there are several grandmasters there, so I am working against some top level shooters. So do all that, and then I'm practicing, and then getting ready for some 2-gun. So I start throwing in some rifle pistol stuff, because we've got an indoor 2-gun match to sort of end the winter before we go outside with M and 3-gun group. And I go to this thing, and I do really well for me. I mean, I was shooting with Josh Freilich and John Wydell, and I had, I'll have to look at the scores, I'll put them up here, an 80-some percent, 85% against those guys. And I was stoked, and I was arrogant. So practice, and then we've got the first winter outdoor match of the season. And I go out, and the day before I was talking to Freilich on the phone, and he's like, "Hey, I've got a Dissident if you want to borrow it." I was just going to load my Atgeir, my M2 up to 14 rounds or whatever, and just shoot that. But I had this opportunity to shoot a Dissident, shot that literally the first time I broke a shot on a box-fed shotgun was on the clock on Saturday, and it went bad. It went really bad. I was so in my head about the shotgun that I gave up tons of points on the rifle. I mean, I'll play all this for you. Look, I'm going to show you all the mistakes. I'm going to show you the mess of it, right? But I left the points that I left, some on the shotgun, but mostly where I left it was on the rifle, and then I'm using this RMR on the Athena, and I had several issues with just this sort of like red flare of light. I guess it was light coming into the optic that I couldn't. It was crazy. I've got a lot to learn. Let's put it that way. So it was my first time shooting red dots outdoors ever. So it was just like I didn't know what I didn't know. So that's kind of where we're at, and it's a little bit of a mess. And I have no idea where I'm going next. I'm just deploying the plan, and the plan really is I'm dry firing 6 days a week in the morning for 15 to 20 minutes, and that is mostly gross motor stuff, shotgun reloads, transitioning between large guns and small guns. And then in the afternoon before my workout, I'm doing another 15 to 20 minutes, and that is all carry optics. The caveat for that is on weeks I've got a weekend match, I'll be pushing, like if it's this Saturday is the USPSA first MAPSA match of the year, and I'm shooting carry optics for the first time. I have no idea what to expect. So this week I'm definitely focused on carry optics with a little bit of 3-gun in there using the Joe Farwell Firearms Dryfire program. That's where we're at. I have no idea how this goes. I'm pretty excited. And really ultimately don't know where I end up in this. I mean, I think I said in the first getting started in 3-gun guns and gear video, I don't know if I'll ever be the best, but I really love this sport, and I hope you guys go along for this journey with me. That's how I feel now. Again, it's just like I'm really excited and reinvigorated by the equipment, by the training, by the new friends I'm making in the process. And I'll introduce you to a whole bunch of people this summer that can help your shooting out. They have, different programs. Some are paid, some are not. And we're going to try a bunch of gear out and see what works and what doesn't for me. And along the way, hopefully we'll have some fun and learn something. So I hope you guys are well. I hope you've had a good couple of seasons. And I hope you're looking forward to what might be a little bit of a tough year with ammo. And but we'll get through it together. And we'll see you guys on the range. God bless. All right, so getting into carry optics in an open requires some new gear. And the biggest thing is starting to put red dots on everything.